a topic which is always brought up when people are discussing how to get Western League of Legends to a comparable or competitive level against the top Eastern, Chinese, Korean League of Legends teams and their scenes. It's this infrastructure argument, and it's often was cited in the last year and a half as the reason as to why Korea's ahead, because obviously from very early on they've had coaches, they've had sister teams, they've had proper team houses, they've had a lot of the factors that have had to be gradually introduced in the West and now to a degree are fairly commonplace. But people will take for granted that coaching is now embraced and it's now a big part of the Western scene and everyone has a coach and don't worry about it, that's all in place, that aspect of the infrastructure is getting built up. But actually, if we think about it, that's still a very new thing in the West. I mean, it was only a year and a half ago or so when Monte Cristo becoming the coach of CLG was actually a huge move. This was one of the first high-profile people to become a real coach, and that was going to be his role within the team. You have to remember, before that, people used to sometimes mix up the term manager with the coach, and so you'd have people like Groove from Gambit, who in reality were just people who managed the players in terms of booking flights or arranging things, or maybe just arranging to have them go somewhere to practice for a week or whatever. But at the most, even someone like Groove, the only real impact he would have on the actual team was more in line with, he would kind of manage the personalities of the people. Like he knew, maybe which person you had to step in with, or he would give them advice from his time as a pro gamer and tell them, for example, a famous example is he told them sort of like, don't just change players if you have a bad result. Like this is a special lineup you've got. From his own experience in Russian Counter-Strike, like if you change players all the time, even if it looks like you're getting a better player, sometimes it might not be as good as the chemistry you had before. And so, he could play that role, like sort of a vaguely approaching the life coach aspect, but really he was just a manager. Now, we've had coaches come in now. Obviously, we had Monty to CLG. We had Loco Doko famously did TSM. We had Leviathan come in with Alliance. Incarnation did work with SK. We've seen a lot of success. And they've also seen some cases that weren't so good. Skara and Dignitas, it wasn't that good really. In general, we think about the way this has all gone, and it feels like the West has started to embrace coaching. But here's how you know that the West, in terms of the paradigm that they're thinking in their teams, hasn't fully, truly committed to coaching, which is that every single LCS does not have a head coach, whose job is head coach, gets to have a say in how people practice, who gets brought into the team, what people do in practice. The fact that every team doesn't have one tells you they're not quite committed, because what's happened is, if teams can get a big name like that, or if they can find someone where they know them personally and they're willing to gamble on them, they'll have a coach then. But the ones who don't know someone who's famous or someone who's good at coaching, like has the skills, or crucially is knowledgeable about the game, the ones who can't find someone like that, they sort of sit back and go, we haven't got anyone yet. We'd love to have someone like that, but at the moment there isn't someone. That's how you know these teams still haven't understood the new paradigm of what coaching is all about and what the infrastructure aspect can do for your team. Because every single LCS team needs a coach. Now, that might sound like a ridiculous statement to someone who's in the old paradigm I said before. They said, well, what do you mean? What if the guy's not good at coaching? What if he's not knowledgeable enough? What if he doesn't even have the authority for the players to listen to him? That's the point. We need to put in place this structure. You're getting the cart before the horse. These things will follow after everything's in place, once it's a real field. The reason why every team needs a coach is just look at the impact that coaches have had on these teams. Even the best teams, if I was to try and give you an outlier, I'd say, okay, maybe if you were a phenomenal team, maybe you really wouldn't need a coach. Maybe you could survive anyway. But then I thought back on all the cases in the West, and actually every single case in the West, pretty much, the ones who didn't embrace the coaching and who waited too long, etc., they had their problems. So the best one ever is Gambit. Gambit with the team who always found a way to return, always found a way to perform, to be very excellent, to be an elite level team. And what happened with them? They fell apart, and they even admitted we didn't have proper coaching. The players couldn't be disciplined, didn't have the proper practice mentality. Darien and Genja never playing on solo queue. They just fell apart. And while Fnatic was off winning things, admittedly, Fnatic's a case I'm going to bring to here. Other teams doing well, Rockhart overtaking them. All these teams, Gambit just fell apart. Fnatic, okay, they won 3 splits, awesome stuff. And they did have a coach, remember? They had Aranea was the coach technically. And before that, they had someone he wasn't really a full-on coach, but he was having a managerial / coach role. Clearly, they still had that mercurial aspect to them, this cavalier attitude where they wouldn't truly be coached. And so what happened to them? Well, they eventually lost the top spot in Europe. They lost it, Alliance overtook them. Okay, TSM, they were another team that always had dominance in NA, always could be a top level team because of the talent level of the team. Well, in came Cloud9, Cloud9 overtook them. Admittedly, not with the super good coaching. I'd put that more on the TSM side. But Cloud9 since have had some coaching aspects. They've kind of pushed the analysis angle further, I think. Evil Geniuses, the old CLG EU lineup, they were famous for that one style, that late game style was amazing. But that fell off super hard in Season 3. And actually one of the things that helped them turn around and almost qualify for Worlds was N-Rated getting fired by Fnatic, coming in and playing a mixture of analysis, like giving some advice, had obviously the authority of just being a top player and winning tournaments. And he was able to help them with the level 1 stuff, with the earlier stuff, giving them the confidence and the mentality that actually you don't have to rely on that old style. You can bring in some of the newer stuff and don't have to stick to that CLGU style late game play. This helped them out. The one example I can actually think of in all of this Western scene is Cloud9. Because even though Cloud9 clearly does have some aspect of coaching and they have the analysis, I actually think they're maybe the only team to push this to the extreme example, just to be fair, in terms of intellectually honest, who I think maybe to some degree could get away with it without as much coaching as other teams, because they're one of the only teams I've ever seen who in the midst of a game itself, before the game even ends, they can start to adapt and figure out what's wrong or what they should do next. That would let them survive a long time, in the same way as the Gambit team fighting let them outlast a lot of the individual skills that are decayed because they're not practicing and all these factors. But even then, if you want Cloud9 to be at their absolute maximum, I think they need to fully embrace the coaching aspect. Now, as far as I can tell, it's hard to know how much they're doing there. But okay, let's say they're doing that as well, like a lot of teams are now. The real point of that analogy there was to point out that no one is exempt from needing this coaching infrastructure. One of the ways you know that the West is in trouble in terms of getting these coaches is that, I made this point on some of the Insider episode, I was given a real offer by a top LCS level team to become their head coach. And I'm talking for real, like I would move to whichever continent it was on. I'd move to the main city that it was taking place in. I'd live in the gaming house. I'd just become the coach. I'd reduce most of my journalistic duties and I'd just spend all day coaching, setting up the practice, figuring out the roles of the players, listening to players, working on man management, chemistry, all these aspects. Not only that, not only did this top team do it, another LCS level team also made me an offer. They wanted me to become the coach. Now, the reason I am giving this as an example is because it's not that like I should never even be asked or considered. It's that this shows kind of the reluctance of other people to just look for people who have other qualities that could help them. Because like I said, the 3 qualities you could really have that could catch someone's eyes. You could be famous. In this case, that's mainly probably what initially caught their eye in my case. You could be good at coaching. Now, this actually is mainly the aspect where this team wanted me to be involved because I was able to talk to them a lot. We had a lot of discussions about what coaching would entail, what my vision was for how you could get players to work with you, how to deal with star players, how to deal with role players, what the kind of roles in the team, how much freedom you can give people, how much people should practice. I had a lot of different ideas than a lot, I think, of the other candidates that were out there. But the third one, to be really knowledgeable about the game. Now, in that respect, obviously, I would have been terrible. Like, I don't know the matchups, and I'd made this quite clear to this team. But that's the point, actually. You're not going to get anyone who has all 3 of those. I mean, that sort of existed with Monte Cristo, and even he had to learn the coaching side of it, what to do there, because he hadn't done it before. Loco Doco, likewise, he had to learn the coaching aspect. I think he took a lot of things from Korean teams he'd been in, but I wasn't necessarily the best straight off the bat. No one really has all 3. So since you're going to have to compromise anyway and maybe get 2 of the 3, I'd say, why not just accept that you need a coach and pick the person who at the moment of the choices you have is the best option for that. So if you talk about it this way, when people say there's lack of experienced coaches out there, it reminds me so much of North American teams and that famous thing of like, oh, there's no talent in North America. Now, you see everyone just plays on solo queue and they're all just, that guy might seem he's okay, but he wouldn't be that good. A lot of that has been proven time and time again to be complete bullshit. Talent has come through every 3 to 6 months in NA. Talent coming through, good players who were there when people were making those comments like 2 years earlier. CLG has been some of them in their team now and always could have been recruited, but people always looked at them and went, oh, well, they missed this quality here. And it's like, well, how's he supposed to ever get that quality? He's never been in a good team. He's never been in a proper practice environment. He doesn't have good enough teammates. If you don't have good enough teammates, sometimes you have to be like 1.5 times better to even have a chance to compete against the good player who's slightly worse than you. Like, in the same sense, I feel like right now, because we're looking for and demanding too much of the really good coach, that you're forgetting that, what's the second option? If you don't get that really good guy who you can't get, who doesn't exist, okay, he's not there. Next guy down, he has these problems. Compared to what? oh, well, compared to nothing, because we don't have a coach. Well, he's better then, isn't he? Well, no, but he's not exactly everything we want. Yeah, yes, and how are you ever going to get that? You have to give someone a try. You have to test someone out. You have to allow someone to develop in the same way as you would with a player. You can't just get the fucking player and go, right, I want a player who's world-class, good at every matchup, sick under pressure, experienced online. Like, what? Do you have $700,000? No? Well, that's what it costs to get one of those, mate, from Korea. So how much do you have? I have $50,000. Why don't we get a good player who's like got skills and he seems like he might be good under pressure, but we haven't really seen it, and we'll test out if he's good under pressure. We'll test out if he's good at world class by bringing him into the fucking team and actually playing him, etc., and developing him in that sense. That's what you have to do in the absence of having the perfect option. So in terms of what a temporary approach that you could do with this is, take one of the main two things, which is you either have to be good at coaching, as in managing people, figuring out how to get the most out of people, designing the practice structure and learning what would work for these people, or being really knowledgeable about their game. In an ideal world, you'd have both. But let's say you don't. In my case, this is why I actually gave some thought to this offer, because what I would have done was I would have taken care of all that and figured out my kind of principles and my belief structure for how we would do the practice and how I would work with, like I would give certain leeway to stars in a certain sense that I wouldn't to another one, but I'd have a lot more responsibility I'd ask from that guy. So in the sense that I have that figured out, well, I can then get me some analysts. I can get one or two people who are very, very knowledgeable, but they're not a coach in that other sense. And they'll feed me the information, which I can relay through the players, and we can figure it out. We can figure out that aspect and we can develop in that respect. In the same way, you could go the other way. You can get someone who's quite knowledgeable like that, but he has no experience coaching. Maybe he's not even got that many good ideas. But hey, let's give it a try. At least he has the knowledge. Maybe he can impress the players in that sense. We can go from the other side as well. We can bring that into it. And you know what? If you've got a groove type guy already, maybe he can take over some of the coaching and you can meld the two together and you can get something out of the team here. If you go back and you think of this Asian myth of the great coaching and infrastructure, there are some examples of good coaching and infrastructure in South Korea. And probably the best example I've seen was probably the Samsung coaches, I think, because even back in the MVPO zone days, they clearly came with an incredible strategy to beat Blaze in that spring final. In the Samsung days later, they had the blue and the white team both seemed to play off a similar style, even though they're different sets of players, and they both seemed to set the meta and be slightly ahead of the meta, and whether that was white just copying blue to catch up with them, whatever it was, the coaches of these teams worked well with the units that they had, and they were able to get ahead. Famously, Colma with SK Telecom in late 2013, they had the perfect pick style for the meta and their team at the time. But you know what? Some of these coaches, they don't seem to have that much influence. I mean, some famous examples would be the CJ coaches, the Blaze and Frost guys. Those guys seem fucking terrible. I mean, yeah, they had periods where they had decent style, but even when the Blaze was winning, they had that really weird one-dimensional late-game style. The Frost coaches, I mean, these guys, I don't know what they were doing for the last year and a half, 2 years of their careers. Nothing, as far as I can tell. Those teams were a fucking nightmare. The players they were recruiting didn't make any sense. The talent they tried out and then threw away didn't make sense. Some of them went on to be way better. Like, ganked by Mom. I mean, why didn't they just keep him in Frost? At least he's half decent compared to some of the shit they had on their team. Then you think of players like... other coaches, I'd pick up the Najin coaches. Obviously, the amount of talent Sword went through was fucking unreal, and they couldn't get a team even in the round of 8 of OGN. Then you look at Shield. Okay, everyone praised that coach when his team won the regional. Amazing stuff. Then his team go to Worlds and get fucking rolled 3-0 in the round of 8. Suddenly everyone's like, oh, he sucks. See, it's not these perfect coaches who know exactly what they're doing. Oh, I'll give you one last one, just as a ridiculous one. The Incredible Miracle coaches. These guys are fucking appalling. These guys... The level of underperformance from those teams is unreal. They've had a lot of talent in those teams, actually. But they would constantly move people from Team 1 to Team 2, and you'd never know which one they were loading up, and were they just splitting the talent, and then they had fucking Lilac, like, position swap to every position in the universe, and it only worked, like, maybe 1 or 2 times ever. The point here is it's not perfect in Korea. But here's the thing. Every Korean team had, well, when they had 2 teams, you used to have 2 coaches, or 1 head coach and 2 coaches below him. So maybe the head coach did the structure and the discipline, and the 2 coaches were, like, genius coaches or mastermind coaches who knew about the game and knowledge, whatever it was. Every coach in Korea, by default, has a coach. Every team in Korea has a coach. Every team in every single Asian country in the top leagues, etc., everyone has a coach. There can't be teams like there are now in LCS Europe. Some of those teams still don't have a coach. In LCS NA, I can't think off the top of my head, but no, there still must be at least 1 or 2 that don't have a full coach. There might be the manager guy who says he's a coach. Like, some of that's bullshit, by the way. That still even fucking exists. There might be a guy who's really just the analyst who gets to say he's the coach because maybe they like to coach themselves and they don't want people to say. This lack of commitment to this is something that holds the Western scene back, because You have to actually commit to it in as much as if you don't have a coach right now, then I'm sorry, mate, anything is better than that. Obviously, it's not. That's a ridiculous statement in itself, but it's better than it in terms of where it gets you in the future. If you never commit to someone, odds of you then getting the super famous guy who's really good at coaching and knowledgeable, it's quite low, actually. He's probably taken somewhere else, and if he's good, he's definitely going to be, and maybe you can't even afford him. So by picking someone now, and you must have someone, you at least make the commitment that coaching is something I'm going to have. And so if I start with a bad one now and he proves to be bad, you know what, next season I'll try and get someone better. And because now we're all getting coaches, there's now all these jobs. Now let's say there's 10 teams in each LCS. There's now 20 spots for coaches. And so someone else out there, when there's 20 spots for coaches like this, you know what? Someone who's coaches a challenger team that does it above and beyond the level they should for their players and they get a great style. You know what? Now I scout him and I bring him over to my position where I had a bad guy before. By creating a job, making an actual industry, more than just one or two genius guys who get to go wherever they want. Now that people can compete for these spots, it's an open position. Not only that, if you want, here's two other factors I want to just end this little rant on. Knowledgeable people. If you want knowledgeable people as analysts or even to try as coaches, the number of teams who don't know anyone, and they come to me, I've had this happen so many times in League of Legends, say to me, which people can we get as analysts? And I say, well, do you use Twitter? And they're like, yeah, a bit. And I was like, if you're just on Twitter and you just follow people who know what they're talking about League of Legends, I could list you like 10 right now, mate, who have really good insights and they have their own vision on the game. Do you know this guy? No, they don't know any of these guys. Maybe know one or two of these guys vaguely, and then they've just heard a bit about them and don't really follow them. So actually, that's on the fucking team manager right there, mate. Your job is to hire the coach and hire someone who's knowledgeable, the analyst. Well, then you better fucking get learning about who's out there who's knowledgeable. They're not just going to come to you, or rather if they do, and you don't know who they are, you're going to ignore that email and you won't give a fuck about that guy and you think, well, who's he? I've never heard of it. That's your job to do that, mate. So the infrastructure also has to take place, since we're going top down from the top people of the organisations. If you're at this team or you're at this team, you better start to learn how to recruit coaches and what to look for in a coach. That's a skill you should have. That's not the coach to persuade you. And so finally, I've got a solution for you there. Now you're probably like, oh, how do we do that? Hold open applications. If you're a team who doesn't know anyone who's famous, really good at coaching or knowledgeable, make an open application. During the off season, you say, right, I've got a coaching spot. Here's how much money. I'd just say how much money you're going to give them. Here's how much money I'll offer for this position. I want someone by this date. Here's the kind of qualities I'd like to have, but you can apply whatever, send a cover letter, send a CV. And then once you get all these applications, some of them are going to be these people I'm talking about, these people who are very intelligent on Twitter. Maybe someone's actually someone from a real coaching background, doesn't know much about league, or if you give them an analyst to be good, kind of in the vein I was going to go with before. All these people apply, and then you pick the one that's best. And you know what? You can have interviews with these people, rather than just kind of this current way they get people is so weird. It's like you either know someone, or if it's someone famous, you can get them, or you just hear about one guy and then he's friends with the other guy and a player who bring him on board. Even if that guy turns out to be good, that's such a fucking haphazard, like heavy-handed, silly way to recruit people, because you could have gotten the same guy and then tried out another guy from the open application and then another guy who comes in who hears, listen, maybe this guy has skills, and maybe there's actually a guy in like Southeast Asia who's coached a team to third place in GPL or something. Go, hey, you know what? If that was available in Europe, I'd apply to that and I'd come and live there. Whatever it could be. Right now, it's silly to be like elitist and pretend like, don't call us, we'll call you. Like, no, you have to actually embrace this and be committed to the coaching ideal. And then also, if you haven't got a big guy right now, just admit you don't, and then open it up so that, you know what, people can find you. Because right now, you guys don't have the skills to get these coaches. So at the moment, you need them to contact you.